Hi, I'm Yohaan. I'm 17 and I spent a week in a rural village in Telangana known as Antwar, and I did this for the sole purpose of understanding what poverty is really about. Get to know what it really is that I have a fear of it. It's just that I try to put myself in the shoes of those who are poor, and after having witnessed so many people go through these struggles, on the road, I see so many people almost my age who are trying to get money when instead they should be getting an education. I think just trying to put myself in that situation and the pain that would come with that, I wanted to really understand what it was about, and more importantly, I think my main goal has been to alleviate it eventually. But I feel that to alleviate it, if you don't really understand the nuances of it and what it really is about and what it means to be poor, you're not going to be effective. And so for that reason, I think that's the main reason I wanted to really understand it in my formative years of this mission that I have.
You went to Telangana?
Yes.
And you went to a village and you lived there for what, a week?
A week, yes.
So how does that work? Do you just show up at the village and say, hi, can I stay with you?
That's a good question. So actually I'd been at that village or nearby the village, actually. It's called a Narayan Care area, and near that there's the Antwar village, which is a part of the Narayan Care area.
You're 17 right now. You're saying 3 years ago you went to teach at a school? 3
years ago, and I did it after that for 3 years.
Okay, wow, all right.
These are elementary school kids, just taught them basic math, science, and
so
all
every
that.
Summer kind of thing?
Every summer kind of thing. Also because it was just a moment for me a lot of fascinating insights for me as to what it means to be poor. But I wanted to take that further, and so what I decided to do was to live on 100 rupees a day in an act of further empathy. And so what I tried to really do was, how am I making decisions on this low, in this low amount of 100 rupees?
So this 100 rupees is supposed to cover what? Your food?
Everything. So
including
food,
stay?
Including stay. And so for what I did for my stay was, a lot of times for stay I had to rely on other people. And so that was another thing I really learned from the experience, in that being poor has you really relying on your community and how important the role of community then becomes. And so with the 100 rupees I had to cover food, water, stay, and basically everything. So my sister did accompany me on this, and for her this was a bit too drastic, especially because she's not as passionate about understanding poverty as me. She was mainly helping me keep me company. The first few days I spent most of my money on chips and chocolate and all of that, and I was like, score, I can eat whatever I want. But after a while,
I keep forgetting you're 17.
After a while, I came to realize that isn't really going to cut it.
Right.
And I'd start getting hungry at about 2 o'clock, and I didn't have money, and so that was often, something that I had to bear. So after a while, I started to buy rice and dal, and I had to learn how to cook this as well. So after trial and error, I ended up eating that for the last 4 days or so of my journey.
So basically, you took what, $700 for a week?
I took 1,000 with me in the airport as well, because I had to fly from here to there. So yeah.
Okay, $1,000 for the week, slightly more than 100.
Yeah, so for the rest of the day, most of my days actually, I would spend it talking to the people over in the Narayan Care and in the Antwar village in particular, a tight-knit community. But at the same time, what was interesting about it, and I think which made my findings even more interesting, was that the financial status was very varied. So while you had some people who were, doing well for themselves, others were struggling to feed themselves on a daily basis. And so
within a 600-person
village. And so for that reason, my perspective of poverty was very different, in that I got to see it from different angles. And I think that was another benefit I received. It's my turn.
Yes. So did you manage to figure out why there's such a disparity in such a small place?
Yeah, so a few of the main reasons, I think, and the main reason I would say is land. I realized in that village in particular, land was what really made the difference between one who is wealthy and one who is poor. And so those people who had land and who had, whose parents and grandparents passed on that land, these were the people who tended to be of a higher financial status. Additionally, I found people who had investments in the sense that people who had say owned livestock, they had a sort of consistent flow of income.
Right.
And these people were doing better financially, and they had some sense of financial liberty. Whereas others who were laborers and daily wage workers, their situation was more precarious.
And so were there actual social circles because of these economic differences, or did everyone just hang out at the same village square all the time?
So There was the common area where most people hung out was near the Kirana store. And the Kirana store, this was where I bought the chips and the chocolate. It's basically like a very small hut-like store which sells basic necessities. Yeah. And so over there, that's where most people sort of stayed around. But I think the main community that was formed was through the occupational purposes and through religious means. So this village in particular was Christian. But what I found very interesting was that just around a kilometer away, there was a predominantly Muslim village. And so that was, again, I was like, wow, just people still remained, there was still a strong, like, connected family. Okay.
So when you say rich, give me an idea of how rich. Would they be like city rich?
No, city rich, they wouldn't be city rich. That's another thing that I found very interesting is the relative nature of poverty, right? Okay. Now, poverty, if you discuss it from an economics aspect, relative poverty is basically, you know, you're poor relative to the median income level in your society. But I think of financial resources and a lack of resources. But with that said, the climb out of poverty is one which requires a mindset shift. Okay. Right? It requires one to believe that really I can become.
Okay, so the idea that if you are born poor, you are in a poor circumstance, you create a bit of an inferiority complex.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So that's another thing that various economists such as Jeffrey Sachs, for instance, contend that poverty is a trap, and once you're in it, you're stuck. Now, to render this trap sort of obsolete, what then is required is a mindset shift. And so that's what I found to be very important during my 7 weeks stay, 7 days stay.
Your chance? Yes. Let's see if you can keep this going.
I don't want to.
All right. So tell me, so the whole idea of this was to get an idea of what's going on in villages, what's going on with people who are poorer than you are. Did you get an idea? Did you come up with some kind of solution?
I did. In terms of solution, so as I went there, I thought about, you know, potential solutions, and should my goal really be to find solutions or to understand these people? And while I did lay emphasis on an understanding as to what poverty is, most of my solutions were rather idealistic. I'm going to be honest. They were like solutions which would be very long-term or solutions which would require a lot of government involvement. But with that said, I did find a few things that I believe that could be directly implemented. And I think one of the main solutions, and again, these are mindset solutions, but one of the main solutions, I think, is an understanding that while the government is surely going to help people out, I find that there's an over-reliance on the government. So the government is doing great things in the region to help the people. For instance, they provide 8,000 rupee subsidies on per, I think, acre of land. I think the solution then needs to become one of how do you help the people help themselves? And I think that was the main takeaway, in that the people in these villages are extremely entrepreneurial and they really have the capacity to change their situation. And another thing that made me realize this, in addition to my journey, was a book which I read by Dr. Robert Chambers, which is called Putting the Last First.
So you've written a book, right?
Yes, I have.
Tell me, what's the book about?
The book is titled 100 Rupees a Day, and it's essentially a conceptualization of poverty after my week-long experience. So in it, I share stories of the people I met and the things I learned from that. So more than anything, it's a lot of introspection and how this experience shaped my perspective. And in addition to that, it is backed by a lot of secondary research which I did through reading various books and articles about poverty in research papers. And so from these, I developed sort of, not an argument per se, but it's a holistic understanding of poverty, which is very individual, but at the same time, it has relevance to others, because I feel like it has the potential to inspire and compel other people to join me on this quest to understand poverty and what it's.
So it's like an anecdotal.
It is, yes. It's completely
poverty.
Anecdotal, but with that, I do add some research which I've done through secondary sources.
Okay, great. So I think I have no idea what to do here.
I think you're gonna lose.
Yeah, right. There's nothing left. Oh God, how did I not see that?
Can't take these out.
You could technically, it might fall.
Quite rigid.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh no. Yeah.
Nice.
No. So wait, that was just you've got a video as well, right?
I do, yeah. So while my sister was there, she helped me film the experience. And I think the main reason that this was important for me was it also helped me when I was writing my book, and that I could sort of recall, like, a lot of these stories were really, really touching, and they still stay with me.
Have you got an interesting story you got from any of these guys you talked to?
Many, yes. So I think a few of them which really stay with me. So there's this one I remember. I think it was mainly for the man who I was talking to. So he was, I think, around 80 years old. And I was walking to the Kirana store and I saw him, and he wasn't sitting down, but he wasn't standing up. He was leaning against this wall-like structure. And so I asked him, like, how are you doing? What are you doing? What's your name? And then he suddenly told me about his experience and what's happened to him. And he said his left leg was paralyzed. And I was like, wow, have you met the doctor? And as I said that, he started to laugh. And I was like, why is this man laughing? And then he told me that he went to the doctor, and then he went like this. He's like, they told me to cut my leg off. And I was like, okay, so why didn't you listen to the doctors? And he said, I ran away. And then he just started laughing. And I was so worried for this man, but at the same time, I was admired by how, he took his struggles, but his attitude remained one of, I'm happy with my life and I can choose to be happy. And I think that really inspired me. Despite his situation, he chose to, not look at his hardships, but enjoy his life and what little he had left. And so then he elaborated on the story. He said a team of 4 doctors came and they said, I need to cut your leg off. I said, no, and I ran away. And that was, I think, as he laughed, I couldn't help but laugh, even though the topic was sort of sensitive. Yeah. But just his approach to it really made me happy. And then on a more serious note, something that really shocked me and made me realize that poverty is more than just lack of money was...
Yeah, it's less a research program, more just an experience.
It was just an experience, and also more than just understanding. It was a lot of personal growth, because I think I gained a lot of values through that. Okay. Like, for one, gratitude. Right, like I take what I have every day so much for granted, but on 100 rupees a day, I came to like cherish everything that I eat on a daily basis. And sometimes I'm complaining to my mom, no, I want good food. But that is good food, right? If you compare it. And so I think that's another way that the experience was really valuable to me.
All right, so another game. Let's see who can win this. I think we've only got a couple of moves left.
I don't want to lose. Okay, let's see.
Oh, that's dangerous. Oh my.
Nice.
All right. No.